Mr. President, Mr. Secretary, General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I am a representative of Human Rights Watch, a worldwide organization dedicated to protecting basic human rights around the world. I would like to say how honored I am to come in front of you today and inform you of the discrimination issues we are uncovering in the United Arab Emirates. I would like to thank you all for letting me take your time to come and discuss this pressing issue. To many people's perceptions, the United Arab Emirates seems like an oasis in an oppressive Arab world with money, goods, strong economy, and human rights guaranteed by their constitution, supposedly. After we dug into the secrets and hidden information, United Arab Emirates was not up to key on these terms. One of the main problems inside the Emirates is discrimination against women and minority workers. In the United States, we have many laws and constitutional rights to keep women, workers, and any human being equal under the law to the rest of our population. Some examples are that women can run for president, Congress, and also any offices of power. They are protected by discrimination laws and OSHA in the workplace. They have the right to vote and the right to an education. We take these examples for granted. In the UAE, however, women cannot rely on such freedoms. Women do not have good working conditions. For example, women are getting unpaid wages, less food than men, too many working hours, and physical and sexual abuse. In the month of January, there was a 2-week strike demanding an increase on wages. My organization, Human Rights Watch, is taking notice and action to stop the injustice of discrimination against certain citizens of the United Arab Emirates. The outcomes we are seeking are economic sanctions against the UAE. We feel that if we united our economies as one and deny them the gift of commerce, which enables their abuses, we can change this problem into a positive solution. We, as an organization, more than that, as a world, want to end discrimination against its people. The United States combats discrimination in all forms, so we feel it is our duty to spread our influence to help this global problem. After we all look into the evidence and strategize a plan, we can look further into rectifying the problem. Our goal is that everyone in this room understands that there is imminent threat to the citizens of United Arab Emirates and that our threat is their own government. Yes, many may believe that United Arab Emirates has a good constitution and rights, but they are actually not keeping their word. On March 13th, court sentenced a woman to 5 years in prison and 150 lashes. What was her crime? Alleged adultery. If a woman wants to get a divorce, she can, but it has to be through KULA, a no-fault divorce. In UAE's elections, 85 women ran for FNC seats, and only 1 woman was voted into office. One example that stuck out the most was an Indian worker committed suicide because of abuse and bullying by the men that was running her work. If we work hard, we all can end this problem in UAE. We just have to stick to a plan and show the citizens that we are here to help them. Thank you once again for allowing me to come to speak to you. It's been a great honor, and I look forward to seeing this problem assessed.
Mr. Secretary General, Mr. President, fellow delegates, and ladies and gentlemen. Please take this time to imagine yourselves being punished, tortured, abused, and ridiculed to the point where you're at your weakest. We as Americans, we can easily retain an attorney and to defend our innocence, but just think of having no one listening to what you have to say or being put to jail because no one's there to prove your innocence or guilty. And there is no one who will be willing to defend your rights as a human being. As a representative of the Human Rights Watch, I feel privileged to stand here before you and present my case of wrongdoings in Saudi Arabia. I am here today to inform you about the mistreatment of Saudi's people. We know that they follow the Sharia law, which calls for punishment, which is cruel and unusual to us, but they go way beyond that law. And their way of punishment and torture is horrifying and goes beyond what is justified for nearly every developed country here on earth. My goal is to either stop the extreme abuse or at least tone it down to where it follows Sharia's laws again. One way to solve this injustice is to put Saudi Arabia through economic justice sanction. The USA has sold Saudi Arabia military vehicles like military aircraft or armored vehicles and other equipment like that. The United States is Saudi Arabia's largest trading partner, and Saudi Arabia is one of the largest U.S. export markets in the Middle East. They have signed a trade investment framework agreement. The continued availability of reliable resources of oil, particularly for Saudi Arabia, is important to the prosperity of the United States, as well as Europe and Japan. And they're our largest trading partner. They give us more than 1 billion barrels of oil each day. But we could refuse to import or export goods to and from Saudi Arabia so we can improve the conditions from there. Because we have other partners from oil too, like Africa, Canada, Mexico, Venezuela, not to mention ourselves. Now, I want to convince you, the United Nations, that Saudi Arabia is in fact mistreating their people in any human way. The following examples I will disclose to you are both extremely unimaginable and horrifying to say the least. This is my reason for addressing you today. For example, an Iraqi man was physically tortured for 8 days to confess a crime that he did commit. You'll also hear about a man that has suffered about 3 years of jail for a crime he didn't commit. Also, a prisoner who endured guards putting chemicals in his mouth for criticizing what they do, like the inhumane conditions he's been living through in that jail. What I'm about to describe to you is cruel, maybe difficult for some to believe, but maybe this information will convince you that we need to take action and call for major changes to Saudi Arabia's abusive way of torture. Let's start with the Iraqi I mentioned earlier. My organization reported that a court, after only 2 sessions, sentenced 4 Iraqis and 2 Syrians to the amputation of 1 hand and 1 foot for stealing money from a supermarket. One of the Iraqis told my organization that interrogators physically tortured him for 8 days before making him sign a confession note that he didn't read. He did commit this crime, but he was still tortured and forced to confess that he did do it. But Saudi Arabia has a law that says that any thief can be amputated of a leg or a foot or a hand for thief or stealing stuff. But the interrogators basically had him on his knees confessing what he did. And the fact that they did this to him was just deplorable. The interrogators got him to sign the honored confession after they decided that he had had enough of the torture. Another interesting story is that of a man who was in Saudi Arabia jail for a crime he didn't commit. Sandy Mitchell was jailed for 32 months for the car bombing of a British engineer, an action he took no part of. Most nights he was punched, kicked, spat on, and hit with sticks. An axe handle was used to beat the soles of his feet to the point of not being able to walk without pain. Mitchell said, "I would have confessed to anything." After his sentence, 2 guards came to his cell, put a hood over his head, and hit him in the back of the head with a blunt object until he passed out. Notice how on the previous story, they interrogated the Iraqi to get him to confess what he did. But this man, however, he had no intention of this crime. He didn't took any part of it, and they just, without a word, they just sent him to jail. And Mitchell was in jail from December 2000 to August 2003. It's amazing how this man could endure this kind of torture for nearly 3 years for a crime that he never committed. The last thing I'll be talking about is also concerning the torture going on behind bars. My organization's world report for 2012 on Saudi Arabia found out about this torture from detainees and prisoners in jail. On January 3 of 2012, Mukab al-Shamari, who has been in prison since 2010, said the guards would be inmates. In July 2012, al-Shamari's family said that the guards assaulted him and put chemicals in his mouth for his criticisms that he said about the guards. And it could have killed him or injured him internally depending on the chemicals that they used. This is a dangerous and inhumane way of torture, and it goes way beyond the Sharia law of what they are supposed to be doing. This is abuse. This evidence is that abuse is going on in prisons and jails, and Saudi is a very uptight country, and they do things that may be crucial, but it's part of their law. However, the things that I told you goes far beyond the set standards of lawful disciplinary action in Saudi Arabia. Now that we have highlighted the previous examples, I think we should consider the main points. As stated earlier, I want Saudi Arabia to stop the extreme abuse, or at least at a minimum tone to where it meets Sharia standards. what they could have done could have easily taken the lives of these men and many others. The Iraqi that was tortured to confession, the man who survived 3 years of abuse for crime he didn't commit, and the inhumane treatment of al-Shamari with the chemicals in his mouth. Those are just 3 of the many horrific stories about Saudi's cruel grip that it has on its people. Hopefully, I've encouraged you to try to solve Saudi's problem. Normal, everyday people like you and me are living in fear of Saudi's reign. One person's simple mistake could end their lives. We can either let this cruel abuse keep on going and get worse, or we can all make a decision now to put a stop to it and save the pain of others, possibly even ourselves. Thank you for your time and attention.
Members of the United Nations and fellow delegates, thank you for allowing me to spend some time speaking to you today. In my home country of the United States, we have a cherished freedom of the press. We feel that this is a vital freedom to ensure a government by the people and for the people. The country of Iran is denying this important right to its citizens by filling its prisons with its journalists who dare to speak out. I'm a representative from the Human Rights Watch, and I have been investigating alleged abuses of constitutionally guaranteed rights against the citizens of Iran. My goal today is to illuminate the abuses today and make a strong case that Iran is not following the constitutional rights promised to its citizens. I will show you that this problem has been long-standing and continues to get worse today. In Iran's constitution, it states, publications and the press have freedom of expression except when it's detrimental to the fundamental principles of Islam or the rights of the public. The details of this exception will be specified by law, which is Article 24. Let's start with a case from back in 2003. A Canadian-Iranian photojournalist named Zara Kazemi was arrested while taking pictures of the urban prison in Tehran. And in the urban prison, there has been many cases of rape and torturement and everything. And they have a non-cruel reputation. And she was beaten to death with a blunt object while she was in prison. This is evidence because constitutionally, journalists should have the right to say what they want as long as they are not going against their own religion or the rights of the public. Obeying her constitutional rights, Zara shouldn't have ever been arrested. Iranian authorities should not have been able to get away with arresting Zara, let alone beating her to death for taking an innocent picture. Next, we will move on to the 2007 case. Ramin Jahanbegloo got arrested because of his response to the president, Mohammad Ahmadinejad's contradiction to the Holocaust. Jahanbegloo was also put in the infamous urban prison until August. This is further evidence that journalists and bloggers truly don't have the right of freedom of the press. Even though he was simply voicing his opinion, Jahanbegloo was still arrested and put into jail where he is today. Finally, we will come to the recent past in the early part of this year. It was reported by Human Rights Watch that in January 2012, 10 journalists and bloggers got arrested. The arrests appeared to be part of the government's most recent campaign to disrupt the free flow of information ahead of parliamentary elections. On January 15th, Prastow, a journalist, blogger, and a women's rights activist was arrested. On January 17th, security forces stormed the homes of Marzeh Razuli and Sahamadan Baragani, 2 journalists, and arrested them. Again, 2 days later, they were arrested, and they arrested Shahram Macheri, another journalist, and at least another six journalists and bloggers have been arrested since then. People close to some of the families said there was no official reason why they had been arrested. Some of the agents accused them of acting against national security and creating propaganda against the government rule. This is evidence again of rights infringement because, as mentioned before in Article 24 of Iran's constitution, it says that citizens have free expression unless it goes against Islamic beliefs or the rights of the public. The journalists who were jailed were stating what they thought about without mentioning anything about Islamic beliefs. And we would like to put economic sanctions on their nuclear production because that way if we put economic sanctions on the nuclear production, they would stop mistreating the journalists and bloggers who supposedly go against the freedom of the press. And my organization has the goal of eliminating Iran's abuses of its citizens and to get them their true freedom of press. Make a decision now to be involved in the action of helping these civilians get the rights that they should have gotten to begin with.
Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to speak on the subject of Lebanon. According to its constitution, discrimination is a protected right in Lebanon. Yet, our organization has found evidence that men and women are not treated equally, and in some cases, women are even sentenced to death. I am a representative from the Human Rights Watch, and I have been investigating alleged abuses of constitutionally guaranteed rights in the country of Lebanon. Our goal is to get the attention of Lebanon's government and show them the seriousness of the problem of discrimination and how they aren't abiding by their constitution, even if it involves economic sanctions. Let's start by discussing the issues of gender discrimination in hospitals. The Daily Star did a report on a campaign that aims to enhance female health status. In Lebanon, there's a study by 2 professors conducting interviews, discussions, and talks in hospitals about the treatment of women and men's staff. The study showed that 56.5% of female nurses would get verbal abuses from men's staff. 66.3% of female nurses would get verbal and physical abuse from male staff, but also patients. It also showed that 31.3%, when given tasks, female nurses would get more demeaning tasks than men. This is one of the many problems with discrimination. This leads into our next story of gender discrimination. In Barrett, researchers in the economic literature did an investigation on the different salaries between males and females. They performed a random household drawing of more than 17,000 Lebanese and looked at their earnings. It showed that although there is a positive correlation between education level, females were still getting paid significantly less than men. It also shows that the gap of pays began to grow over time. This also proves to show there is a problem of discrimination in Lebanon. This leads into my last point about discrimination. BBC News ran a story recently on honor killings throughout Lebanon. The story reports of many cases where a man would kill a female in the family to redeem the family's name for an alleged offense committed by the woman. Between 1999 and 2007, there were 66 court sessions and 82 murders of women because of honor killings, and each of the perpetrators were given lenient sentences, most with only a few months of imprisonment, and some even walked free. Yes, in Lebanon, where a man is convicted of murder of a woman, he is sentenced to a few months in jail. Yet, if a woman does the same, she likely gets life in prison. Discrimination is obviously a problem, but how bad does it have to get before Lebanon does something about it? My goal was to show how discrimination is not protected against in Lebanon like it's supposed to be. Hopefully, you see that now. Today, I talked about gender discrimination with female nurses, female salaries, and by far the worst, honor killings. I encourage you to support the call for economic sanctions against Lebanon and help put an end to women's inequality. Thank you again for the privilege of being allowed to speak here today.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I've come here today to discuss the repeated and atrocious violations of the country of Jordan's Constitution. In my country, as Americans, we do have many rights that we take for granted, but some of these rights we believe are inalienable, such as the right of press. I am a delegate from Human Rights Watch, and I have been investigating alleged abuses of the constitutionally guaranteed rights in the country of Jordan. Today, I'm here to convince you that the country of Jordan is denying its citizens the basic rights of its constitution. After hearing my evidence against Jordan, I believe that you will agree that economic sanctions are necessary in order to provoke the country of Jordan to change. For our first piece of evidence, I have a story from cpj.org, the Committee to Protect Journalists, where a journalist named Jamal Muhates was imprisoned for his article pointing out the flaws of Jordan's government. Article 15.1 of the Jordanian Constitution states that every Jordanian is allowed to express their opinion by speech, in writing, and other forms of expression. Jamal Muhates was arrested for expressing his opinion in his article, and the freedom to do so is protected by the Jordanian Constitution. Think about, as Americans, we have comics in the newspaper that make fun of our government, but no one gets arrested for them. Now, if you compare this to Jordan, you would likely be put in jail and possibly sentenced to death for this article. Other people have been imprisoned for exercising their freedom of press as well. An example of said imprisonment is from Freedom House. A court jailed a columnist for criticizing cooperation between the Jordanian and U.S. intelligence agencies during a television appearance. Article 15.1 of the Jordanian Constitution states that every Jordanian is allowed to express their opinion through speech, writing, and other forms of expression. This example directly violates the Constitution of Jordan due to the fact that he was persecuted simply for his opinions. These imprisonments aren't just for what is on paper, because electronic publications are a contributing factor to this problem as well. Our final piece of evidence is from BBC News, where a law in Jordan requires electronic publications to get a government-issued license. The Culture Ministry will have the authority to block websites that don't have a license, and to close the website's offices without reason or without obtaining a court order. Article 15.2 of the Constitution of Jordan states that freedom of press and publications shall be ensured within the limits of the law. With these stories as evidence, I hold it self-evident that the economic sanctions are indeed necessary in order to provoke the country of Jordan to succumb to the pressure of the United Nations and change the laws that oppress their people. Thank you again for your time and cooperation on this matter.
Thank you, Matthew. And that was our last representative investigating a country. You need to finish up your rating sheet for this. Please put any comments that come to mind, especially the positive ones that help us learn what we do well. Now these will be turned back to you in just a few minutes. I'm going to tally the votes for Lebanon, or Jordan. Tally the votes for Jordan. We'll publish those results up here. And while your whole grade does not hinge upon it, of course it does affect it a little bit, how you moved the crowd. Yes, sir. Well, to edit that later.